Margaret Wheatley, a well-traveled American writer and someone who has been a part of communities all over the world, once said, "When we seek for connection, we restore the world to wholeness. Our seemingly separate lives become meaningful as we discover how truly necessary we are to each other." And it just so happens that when we seek connection, we find community. Be it the area that you live, the religion that you practice, or the hobbies that you enjoy, we're all connected in some way. But what about those members of our community whom we choose to ignore that connection with? Be it a difficult customer at work or a homeless man arguing to himself, there are those members of our community whom we avoid, whom we judge, and whom we sever our connection. In short, we fail to empathize with them. I myself, not that long ago, was an outcast of my community. Following an unstable romantic relationship, I ended up living out of my tiny little Toyota Corolla in a city that was unfamiliar to me. From that awful experience, I had an incredible viewpoint of everyday empathy. It could change a person's entire day, and a lack of it could do an equal amount of damage. I believe that by practicing empathy, we can be the change in our community. Today, I would like to talk about what empathy is, why we should use it, and how it can cause change. So what exactly is empathy? Well, empathy is feeling the experiences of another person. And how might we do that? Well, sometimes it's easy to recognize when other people show us empathy. For example, if you're standing in an incredibly long line at the grocery store and the person in front of you with their cart full allows you to cut in line because you just have one item. They know the feeling of being trapped in a super long line to purchase one thing. But other times it's a little more subtle. Us as humans, we love to humanize other things. We give little personalities and thoughts and feelings to our animals, to our pets. You know, your cat probably doesn't believe it's the princess of the house, but we sure do love to believe that they do. Other examples are children who tuck their stuffed animals into bed at night to make sure they feel safe and cared for. So why might we misattribute these cognitions and emotions to our animals and our inanimate objects? Well, humans are naturally wired to empathize with other humans. We have an innate need to socialize, and empathy is a basic tool to do so. But sometimes we can get confused and believe that pity and sympathy are the same thing as empathy, which they are not. Pity and sympathy are simply feeling sorry for another person's experience, and it's a great first step to empathy. But if you stop at pity and you stop at sympathy, it's easier to feel a great detach from that person and their situation. It's easier to see that person as other, their life just being too different from your own for you to really establish that connection. People don't need just some objective pity. They need to feel understood. So now that we have kind of an idea of what empathy is, what motivates us to use it? Well, empathy functions as the best way for us to strengthen our bonds in our community. Imagine a neighbor bringing a home-cooked meal to a family suffering the passing of a loved one. Maybe that neighbor has experienced that himself and he knows the grief associated with it. Empathy builds the emotional infrastructure that communities and relationships rely on. It's unfortunate that we choose to pack away this tool when it comes to some of our most isolated and vulnerable members. For example, when I was living out of my car, I had the opportunity to meet many other people who also did not have homes. One woman, I'll just call her Nicole. Nicole had a huge mat of hair that hung down her waist, and her skin was so covered in dirt it would flake off in places, and you could see that she was actually very pale. She had been in and out of jail quite a few times, and I assume it's because people thought she looked very scary. But one thing that people didn't know about Nicole was that she had suffered some pretty severe abuse at the hands of her ex-husband, and as a result had a pretty extreme phobia of rain and water. Because of that, Whenever it even looked a little bit cloudy in the sky, she could be found hiding out underneath the overhang of a storefront, trying to get out of any possible water. She once told me that she preferred to be incarcerated because, at least in jail, she did not have to fear the weather. But the thing is, Nicole did not need jail. She needed therapy. But when we choose to see people as characterized outcasts, like the homeless man or the drug addict or the gangster, we fail to see their stories, their personal stories. And as a result, we fail to find solutions that work for them. So, finally, how can empathy change our community? Well, a community isn't made of just of the people who are doing well. It takes all members for it to be whole. Not to mention, we don't avoid our own suffering forever. A great example is something that Helen Rice talks about in her book called The Empathy Effect. That when school teachers show empathy to their struggling students, they're able to improve their self-confidence and their interest in learning. And we all know that children who have an interest in learning grow into adults who seek out higher education. And that's a great cause and effect that we can see easily about how it can change our communities. But what about if we put empathy where empathy lacks? Empathy lacks where there is prejudice, violence, and anger. A great example is a person who treats customer service persons very poorly. They're failing to empathize with that customer service person. They're failing to choose to imagine what it must be like to be yelled at work. So, to sum it all up, to kind of get the gist of it, we've talked about what empathy is, why we should use it, and how it can really cause change in our community. I personally believe that we should care about our communities, and I think empathy is an amazing way to do so. It can build people up for the future, and it can help people out in the present. It allows us to feel more accepted by others, and it allows us to be more accepting of others. So the next time that you see someone who is dealing with something or suffering, try to imagine yourself in their shoes. As Barack Obama once said, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.